Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is David Novak. This is going to be a departure from anything that I've done so far on this channel, somewhat. It's probably going to wind up being a rambling, meandering discourse. So it's inspired by a couple of videos I've seen lately. Number one is a book haul by booktuber Aaron Facer. He ordered some books and got some books written by Dante. Another source of inspiration is booktuber Bryan M.R, who has been reporting on his progress in reading the Divine Comedy by Dante. And so, even though I have not read Dante for quite a while, Dante is very much in my mind these days. Now, one of the books that Aaron Facer got was Dante's Rime, R-I-M-E, which I presume means rhyme, but I won't be sure of that until I look at that book and read what it's translated as, I suppose. So, in my course of familiarity with Dante, which goes back quite a ways, I have never found out what a complete bibliography of Dante would be, and I have never had all of Dante's writings, to be sure. At one time I thought it would be nice to have a complete recording of the audio of Dante, and what little I was able to find always had some kind of cheesy music in the background, so that never occurred. And now I don't know if I would do that. But I would like to talk about Dante a little bit. When I saw that such a book as Aaron had ordered, he ordered more than that, and I can't remember. I think he ordered other books. He got Boccaccio's biography of Dante, and he got the rhymes. And I had not known that such a book existed. And so I put it in my cart, and I wavered a little bit, and then I ordered it. And as it happens, the package came today, and I thought that I would take a look at it. Oh, and it is exactly the same cover that Aaron has. When I ordered it, it appeared that the cover I would be getting here in the U.S. would be different, but I knew that the smaller font than I like. Now I don't know what I knew because I lost my train of thought. I knew that the book would be the same thing in the interior, even with a different cover. Now, I was specifically interested in this because I noticed that this company, which is Alma Classics, also publishes Cecco Angiolieri, whose book I do have, a contemporary of Dante, and this is a lovely book if you are interested in Italian poetry of the time that is completely unlike anything you will find in Dante. But so I was pretty well assured that I would have good luck with this. Now, I don't know. I am certainly hoping that this is not a selection including, I think it is not. The Vita Nuova and the Convivio, I think it is. Yeah, Convivio are other books, and I was looking for something that doesn't duplicate those because I have those. So I thought I should tell you about my experience with Dante a little bit. Now, in a Steve Donoghue video, I believe it's a Dante Starter Kit, he gives the advice. He says, normally with other writers, I tell them just plunge into the work or maybe do a little check at Wikipedia first. But with Dante, he said, Dante's the exception. You have to read like 6 biographies of Dante before you read Dante. That's not exactly what Steve said. It was something to that effect. And I know that for me, if I had gotten that advice, it would have been fatal to me. Fortunately, BookTube was not a thing at the time that I was introduced to Dante. One of Aaron's commenters said, I've had the Divine Comedy on my shelf for a while, but I'm a little bit intimidated by it. And I think advice such as Steve's tends to add to the intimidation factor. As I said, for me, it would have been bad advice. I'm sure it's very good advice for a lot of people. It depends on what you're looking to get out of Dante, I suppose. Now let me tell you how I found out Dante. When I was 11, I wrote my first poem. And sometime by the time I was 15, I had taken on the mantle, so to speak. I was a poet and writing poetry seriously. And of course, everybody about me knew that. And it must have been for Christmas. My sister bought me a Christmas present, which was or would prove to be of momentous import. And that was this volume, the Penguin Classic, Dorothy Sayers' translation of Hell. I read it and swiftly went on to Purgatory and then Paradise. So I must have been a teenager yet. And you know, I don't know any, I'm only, since reading Gibbon earlier this year, I'm only beginning to start to be interested in medieval history. And I read it without any knowledge. Now, in Bryan's video, he talks about, he said he's approaching it without all of that sort of scholarly baggage, if you will. Those are not his words. Those are my words. And he's finding it to be the story of a man in the middle way. So you know the lines begin nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita. Mi ritrovai per una selva oscura, che la diritta via era smarrita. So he's in a dark woods and his way has been lost. I mean, he's lost his way. And that's a fairly acceptable reading of the Divine Comedy as a midlife crisis, so to speak. And indeed, it's not an incorrect reading at all. Now, because I was reading it when I was a teenager, my take was different than that. I was very hyper aware of the love story. Dante had fallen in love with Beatrice, or Beatrice, I suppose. I was criticized once for, in a poem, metering it as Beatrice, even though that's how, in my circle, we have always said it, not Beatrice, though I believe the older way of saying it in English was Beatrice, but I would say Beatrice. It was a love story. And I said, oh, Dante's story is just like mine. And it was. I had had a similar experience. Now, Dante went on and has this whole numerology thing where it happened when he was age 9 and all these. 9 is a very important number, don't get me wrong. But I personally believe it happened at 8 because to me it happened at 8. But nobody will argue one way or another about that. So that was how I read Dante and loved it, of course. Let me go on. So when I was probably 20 or early 20s, I read the Divine Comedy a second time. And this time I went with the Sinclair translation, which here's the first volume. Whoops. Second volume. And third volume. Now this is a prose translation, but it has the virtue of having the Italian on facing pages, which is a requisite if you can handle it. Now, I happen to be lucky because in high school, my favorite teacher, who was my Spanish teacher, also had a class in Italian. So I believe I took 2 years of Italian in high school, and then I took 1 or 2 classes of Italian in college. So I had the basic pronunciation down, and I had the rudimentary vocabulary down. And so I could pronounce out the sounds. Not that I think I went through the whole thing that way, but nevertheless, it was a help. So I read it that way. I initially was going to copy out the whole book by hand, and that fell by the wayside. It never happened. So for critical apparatus on Dante, the only thing, well, I'm sure I've read things that I can't remember, but the main go-to for me was T.S. Eliot. In his selected essays, you can find Dante, which I think is his first essay. He gives good essays on everybody in this book. It's really an excellent book. But probably the essay that resonates more with me is What Dante Means to Me, which can be found in To Criticize the Critic, where he discusses his relationship with Dante, which, as mine, is a personal relationship. He talks about reading Dante in the Italian and memorizing it as best he could, and he supposes that he sounded awful to anybody who heard him in his stumbling, bumbling Italian, which he did not feel all that confident in. But I believe he was being modest. He was probably better than he let on. So that's the critical stuff for Dante. Let me show you my other Dante books. This book says Literary Criticism of Dante, and I haven't looked at it for a long time. It's got On Eloquence in the Vernacular, De Vulgari Eloquentia, and this is all in English, and some other little things I read this and don't remember much. It's probably not something that is necessary for anybody, and I don't think it's included in here, but I have somewhere his letter, the famous letter to Can Grande. I think it might be in an anthology of letters that I have. People have made a lot of reference to Dante climbing those stairs, or I forget the exact quote, but it comes from that letter, I believe, and what Dorothy Sayers called pinching poverty. Now, they say poetry can't be translated, but the Dorothy Sayers translation of Dante served me well. Obviously, when I graduated to Sinclair, that was better. I prefer prose translations of great poems. John Ciardi, I think, has a version, and it's not to my taste. However, if I were to read the Divine Comedy again, and I hope to live so long to do that, It will be this version. This is translated by Mark Musa. I have a book of Dante essays by him as well, and I think he's about the best out there. But I have not investigated everything. You know, people like Clive James, I think, have translated it, and I can only imagine it would be something of a joke. But I haven't investigated it. There was an essay maybe about 10 years ago by Joanne Acosella in the New Yorker that talked about translations of Dante, I believe, and it's a very good essay. I probably have it clipped out or photocopied somewhere. So this is the edition I would read. It has everything. Not a lot of apparatus, critical apparatus or explanatory material, but I find that generally Dante tells you what you need to know if you want to follow his story. You know, for some things like the second voyage of Odysseus, well, you probably have a vague idea of who Odysseus was. And then Paolo and Francesca, you know, everything you need to know is in the canto, which recounts their love. You don't need to know who they were historically. The way hell is set up, it's not that people sin and then God comes and throws them down into that circle. Hell is the state of soul that people create in themselves by doing bad things. So, you know, the man who with his sons, was it Ugolino? They're all locked up in the tower, sealed up, and gradually they all die. You don't need a footnote to tell you the history of that. Now, if I go through it again with a little bit more medieval history, I will be more interested in that aspect of the comedy, but it is not required at all. Now, sometime later, I went and bought the Vita Nova, and I bought this at Rizzoli bookstore in Water Tower Place. It's no longer there, of course. And when I bought it, the cashier was a young woman, and she said, "Oh my God, I just finished reading that, and that is the most beautiful book I've ever read." That has always stuck with me. This, of course, is the Mark Musa translation again. Now, I recently came across another translation, but I haven't really looked at this one. I don't think I need it after the Mark Musa. So there's that. Now, sometime in, I must have been about, let's see, it was probably late 1990s. I was working as a photocopyist for a big law firm, and I had found at the library a very nice edition of the Convivio by Dante. And since I was working as a photocopyist, I made a copy of it. So here it is. And of course, I blew up the size. It's, let's see, I'll show you a little bit of it. It's not exactly my favorite book. It's a big project which he started and then abandoned after four cantos or chapters, and I couldn't even figure out who Tully was. Tully is another name for Cicero. I had no idea about any of that because it's only lately, and it's only been bit by bit, even for the last 10 years, that I've started to climb my way into some of this classical scholarship. So this, of course, if you were going to say where to start, this would not be the place. And so I am just ecstatic to have learned about this book on Aaron's channel. I think that is mainly what I've got to say. I pulled out John Frederick Nims here, if you know him, just because and he edited this marvelous anthology for beginning writing students, which I had a writing class with Paul Carroll, and it was an earlier edition of this. He has passed on, and David Mason has obviously updated his book, but it was a marvelous starting point for students of writing poetry. But the anecdote I wanted to account was many years ago. I was at the start of a new relationship, and we had gone for mango smoothies at a place on Michigan Avenue across from the Art Institute. And this place also had used books for sale. And in that store, I found a copy of some sort of selected poems by Dante, translated. I don't remember if it was bilingual or not. I've never figured out since what that edition was. But I looked inside the book, and it had formerly belonged to John Frederick Nims. It might have had one of those plates inside of it. It was his book. And I so much wanted to buy it. It was only like $7, I think, but I had no money on me. And at this point, I was not going to ask for a loan to buy the book. So I missed out on that chance. When you get older, you realize it doesn't matter if you got the book or you didn't get the book, because you have it up here. Oh, this, by the way, my partner said you should do something about that. I had a close encounter with a tree yesterday, and so that's why I have that thing on my head. Now, I don't know if any of this has made much sense, but that is where I am with Dante. Now, if you want to know about my personal relationship with Dante in greater detail, I have a long poem called The Requiem, and there is a canto or chapter which has Dante as a character in it. The relationship in which Dante stands to Virgil is the same relationship that probably 1,000 poets stand to Dante. Dante has come down from the ether and guided multitudes of us, the fruits of which are good or bad, as chance determines. It doesn't really matter. Matt Wall, another booktuber, often talks about how it really is not the writer's prerogative to worry about that sort of thing, whether his work is good or bad. It certainly is not. The relationship in all cases is the same. Dante has been like a father figure for many of us. And my poem indicates that. Now, if you want to read that, there is an excerpt up at my website, which you will have to hunt for, under the heading of Discourse on Love. And the reason I excerpted that piece was because when the book came out, I was I was attending book fairs and stuff and trying to promote it. And I made a little chapbook, and I titled it Discourse on Love, that I was handing out. So I had the text ready to go to put up on the website, so you can find it there. So that's me and Dante. I certainly invite you to look at that. To take it back to Eliot, in the quartets, there is a section, it's about a page and maybe 10 lines. There's a section where he writes in the style of Dante, not with rhyme by any means, but I believe it's reasonably metered, and he was purposely imitating Dante. And in his essay, What Dante Means to Me, that's the essay in this book. He says that those lines cost him more sweat and blood than any other lines he ever wrote. I mean, the quartets are his masterpiece, and those lines are outstanding. I cannot imagine trying to write in imitation of Dante, and the fact that he did so and succeeded so well is only a testament to Eliot's stature as a poet. Anyhow, that is what I would like to conclude with, and if you have any questions, please put them down in the comments below. The various booktubers that I've mentioned, I will try to link to in the comments as well. Thank you for stopping by.